Greetings and welcome everybody to the Art of Tumbao, a podcast dedicated to helping social dancers unlock the deeper essence of Afro-Latin dance. My name is Musa with Social Dance Mastery, and in this first episode, this is our first episode, we're gonna dive deep into a concept that's foundational to how we move on and off the dance floor. We're gonna talk about tumbao, what it means, where it comes from, and why it's so essential for Afro-Latin social dancers. Usually people first hear this word from Celia Cruz's famous song, La Negra Tiene Tumbao. But have you ever stopped to ask yourself, what is Celia talking about when she says the word tumbao? What does it mean? And why is it so important for us as social dancers? Well, that's what we're gonna dive deep into in the Art of Tumbao. Let's start with where most people encounter this word for the first time. Celia Cruz's 2001 La Negra Tiene Tumbao. The song became a hit. And Celia talks about a woman who walks with tumbao. And in the music video, if you search this music video up, you'll see by the end of the video, the whole block is following this woman walking. And if you search up the word tumbao right now, if you search it up on Google, what you'll see is it'll tell you tumbao is a stylish way of walking. But I would like to add more to this definition because it's deeper than that. It's deeper than style. I'd say tumbao is a presence, and it's a way of movement that really shows a deep presence within a person. And this becomes very interesting for social dancers. As an instructor, as a movement coach, if I show someone a basic salsa step, that's one thing. But to show the essence behind the step, the meaning behind the step is another thing. That might include showing how to allocate the weight against the floor. It might include showing how to isolate the different joints. It might include showing the contrary body motion. This will bring a different flavor to a person's basic step if they only knew just the step, right? And this is how tumbao can transform a dancer's experience in the social dance scene, primarily because they're working on their own movement, how they're projecting their movement, their confidence when they get in the dance floor. When Celia Cruz talks about La Negra Tiene Tumbao, the black woman has tumbao, y no camina de lado, she doesn't sidestep. What Celia's talking about? What's she saying here? Well, she's talking about how this woman walks with confidence. This woman walks with purpose, and her movements are magnetic. And this is why, in the video, you can see, this is why by the end of the video, everyone's following her. She's stopping traffic. She's just affecting her environment, her space with her presence, right? And for social dancers, this becomes so powerful when people tap into that movement, those body mechanics. This is the deeper essence of all of these dances that carry this similar technique when it comes to contrary body motion and the tension within the body and how that's used to really create presence. So if you are interested, if this fascinates you in any level whatsoever, I encourage you to look deeper into the roots of the tumbao, right? Go deeper, go and research before 2001's La Negra Tiene Tumbao song by Celia Cruz. Go deeper and figure out where this word comes from, where this concept comes from, because the story is fascinating. To really understand this concept of tumbao, it's so important to go back. It's important to go back to the African roots of this word and this concept. And it's so interesting because in the word tumbao itself, there are two letters. There's a letter combination that can be traced all the way back to the Bantu languages spoken in Central Africa. And this is a very interesting story, and it's happened with a lot of different languages in the diaspora. A lot of the colonial languages that were used at the time, such as English, Spanish, and French, there's a lot of words that have African influence origins within them. For example, in Spanish, because of that connection to the Moors, there's a lot of Arabic words such as arroz or ojalá. And we also get those African origin words. And this is where we get the two-letter combination that is used in Tumbao. And this is the M and the B. This MB letter combination, if you really look this up, you do the research and you trace this letter combination back, you'll see how it will bring you directly to the Kikongo, to the Bantu languages spoken in Central Africa. And this is where we get a lot of words. A lot of words that we use today are using these two letter combinations. And this is how you trace it back, right? Such as gumbo. Gumbo is a word. Zombie. Zombie, trace that word back, look at where zombie comes from. Djembe is another word. Marimba, the instrument, or the marimbula, all of these words have that MB letter combination, which tells you that there's some African influence involved here. So when we bring it to the Tumbao, which has that MB, we can see where this is coming from, right? Now let's just take some more Afro-Cuban styles of music, such as mambo, which has the MB, or timba, which is another one that has the MB. But this MB letter combination wasn't the only one. There's different letter combinations also that tells you that this is coming from that Bantu language sector within Central Africa. Another one is NG, and this has to do with tango. Tango has the NG, and if you really look up the roots of tango, you can see that it has that African influence as well. Songo, which is another Afro-Cuban style, has the NG. So these letter combinations, they let us know directly what the influence is coming from. Now, if we think about Cuba, we know that in Cuba, the Congolese were one of the highest populations of enslaved people that came to Cuba during the transatlantic slave trade. The people from the Congo, there was a high number of enslaved people that were coming from that region of Africa. And the traditions, the movements, the expressions of these people, they were deeply influenced. They deeply influenced what we now call Afro-Cuban music and Afro-Latin music in general. And this story is fascinating, and this is how we start to really unpack what tumbao means. Tumbao, in essence, it represents a way of moving that is deeply tied to the Afro-descendant body movement aesthetic, right? And when we talk about tumbao, that's what we're gonna go to. We're gonna really talk about what is valued within Afro diasporic body aesthetic. What is being valued? How is the character of movement, and what is it describing? What is the essence of that movement? This is what really happens when this aesthetic, when the African aesthetic of movement starts to conflict with the European aesthetic of movement. This is where we start to develop that contrary body motion, when these two contrary movement aesthetics start to interact and intertwine into one. So since we're talking about the language of all of this, let's talk about what tumbao means in Spanish, the colonial language that was used in Cuba at the time when that concept of tumbao was developing within Afro-Latin forms of music and dance. Tumbao, let's talk about what does tumbar mean in Spanish. When people say the verb tumbar, what are they talking about? Well, tumbar is used to describe when something is pushed over or when something topples. A tumbárselo, or se tumba, like it fell over, right? And this really connects this concept back to movement, which is gonna really be valuable for social dancers. When we connect this concept to movement, what this is talking about is it's talking about the human gait cycle. And the human gait cycle comes out of body mechanics, and it's talking about the mechanics of how we naturally walk, right? And if you really break down the mechanics of how we walk, we're really just falling and catching ourselves, falling and catching ourselves over and over again. When our foot comes up for that stride and it heel strikes, before it heel strikes, that energy and that weight is falling and then it catches itself, right? And some of these techniques, these concepts within body mechanics is really what you have to consider if you want to get into the authentic movement aesthetic of a lot of these Afro-Latin dances, the dances from the Afro diaspora. All of these dances contain a movement aesthetic that is very particular. And it's very particular because it's a fusion between African movement aesthetic and European movement aesthetic, which can be highly contrasting in a lot of different ways. But within a lot of these dances, such as salsa, bachata, merengue, samba, kizomba, zouk, a lot of these social dances and other dances from the Afro diaspora, you'll see that they contain this concept of contrary body motion, the tension between two opposing movement aesthetics. The African movement aesthetic, which really values the connection to the earth, very grounded and cyclical movements, movements that move in circles or cycles, right? As opposed to the European movement aesthetics, which value the levitation, which value form and structure and more linear directions of movement. When these combine within one body, which is happening, which really gives the essence and gives that magnetic nature of the tumbao, is when you combine both the African and European movement aesthetics into one. And it's what creates the tumbao. I've been to Cuba several times, and you can see naturally people walk with this tumbao. And it's the connection to the earth, it's how they've been conditioned to move in that environment. It really shows in other places as well, that when people walk, they have a certain essence to them. And this becomes especially important for social dancers. When first learning the basic steps, when first getting into different choreographies, to always remember to maintain your tumbao, maintain that essence that keeps the dance authentic to where it came from, to the movement styles that it came out of. Okay, so now let's take the concept of tumbao completely out of movement. We're gonna come back to movement, but let's take it out of movement to see what tumbao means in a different context. What does tumbao mean when a musician says the word? And this is what makes this concept so dynamic, is because it has different meanings in different contexts. Same as mambo has different meanings in different contexts. But when it comes to tumbao, when a musician uses the word tumbao, they're not necessarily talking about how you move with your body. A musician is using it in the context of what you play with your instrument. And this brings up the whole concept of Afro-diasporic theoretical music concepts. There's a lot of African music concepts that started to become integrated within the music that was happening at the time. For example, salsa. Before, the antecedents of salsa, such as the danzón and the contradanza, were very much formal types of dances when it comes to their movements very formalized, very stiff, very structured. And also the music represented and reflected that structure, highly structured and highly formalized. But it was in the danzón which started to add that one section within the danzón where it changed into a section that was a little bit more groovy, had a little bit more flow, that made people dance more, that made their hips sway more. It was that section that included the rhythms of the tumbao. So in Afro-Latin music, particularly in salsa, in son cubano, in son montuno, these are some of the root dances of salsa. The tumbao is referring to the repetitive rhythmic patterns played by certain instruments. And this is the whole key of how polyrhythmic music works within Afro musical aesthetics, right? Because in Afro musical aesthetics, and you have all the instruments playing at once. But how does this work? How do you get all the instruments playing at the same time, yet still have harmony and not have the instruments clash against each other, right? This is the magic of how polyrhythm works. For example, if you've ever seen an orchestra before they're about to play, when they're tuning up, when the orchestra's tuning up, you can hear all the instruments playing at once, the flute playing over here, the bass over here, the horns are playing over here, the piano's doing a little something over here. You can hear that dissonance in the air and things, it seems like all the instruments are clashing, right? So it's very possible for instruments when they're all playing at the same time to have a lot of clash. But when it comes to polyrhythm, how do they do it so that the instruments don't clash? So that all the people playing the bell patterns over here and the drummers playing their pattern here and the horns and the flutes playing their melodies here, how do they all come together and don't clash? Well, it's all happening through tumbao. And what that means is that each instrument is given their specific tumbao, meaning how they walk through the measure of that line of music, right? So, for example, within salsa, 3 of the most important tumbaos to be able to identify as a salsa dancer, to be able to connect with the music and have good musicality, is the conga tumbao, right? Which is cucu, pak, cucu, pak. And then you have the bass tumbao, gung, 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 gung. And then the piano montuno, or the piano tumbao. And these are the tumbaos. They are repetitive rhythmic sequences or patterns that are played over and over again. And you can see, basically, it's how that instrument walks through the measure. And that's how you can connect the tumbao musically to the tumbao in movement. It's how the instrument walks through the song. And how this works polyrhythmically is that all of these tumbaos together, when they interlock and interweave, that's what creates that harmony, because they're sort of playing in between each other. And the effect that this has when they interlock, when they create that engagement together, this is the harmony that we feel as dancers when all of these instruments are playing together in sync like that. So it's a polyrhythmic tapestry that makes all of this Afro-Latin music so dynamic. This is the essence of what makes it so powerful, what makes it so rich in its rhythmic layers. And even though the instruments are playing independently, they are all locked in harmony. And this is exactly what we do with our connection with the music and our connection with our partner. And this is the role of tumbao when it comes to the rhythm and how musicians use tumbao when they're playing. So to wrap this all up, tumbao is more than just a rhythm. Tumbao is more than just a way that you walk. Tumbao is a way of life, and it's how we move through the spectrum of experience. That's our personal tumbao. And in upcoming episodes, we're going to continue to dive deep into the roots of Afro-Latin dance, music, and culture, giving you the tools as a social dancer to be able to have more confidence, to be able to express yourself, and to be able to embody the authenticity of all of these dances, to really experience the full potential, the power, and the essence that these dances have to share. So thank you for tuning in to the very first episode of the Art of Tumbao. My name is Musa with Social Dance Mastery, and if you enjoyed this episode, if this resonated with you in any level, let me know your thoughts. Send me your feedback and tell me what other topics you'd like to hear about. I'm very curious about that. And remember, keep walking with your tumbao. And I'll see you in the next episode.